Hey guys, welcome back to the SDBO YouTube channel. I know it's been a while since I've made another video, but I wanted to come back and talk about the fundamentals of demographics. So before we get started, I just want to let you know my son is with me, so if you hear any noises in the background, you're not going crazy. That's just my son. He's just creating a ruckus. So okay, let's dive right into it. So as always, SDBO and myself, we are not certified professionals giving any kind of advice. This really is just information to help you get a base level knowledge that you can go and explore more through professional avenues. That being said, what is demographics and how does it relate to practice ownership? So demographics, we might understand, is just a statistical analysis of collected data of a representation of a population. So we're looking at a city, what does that city look like, and so on and such forth, right? It can be used in different fields for different purposes. And we'll talk about how we utilize it here in business ownership and how we can take advantage of some knowledge that we can gain from the general populace. So the fundamentals regarding the business aspect of demographics can really relate to the demand, the supply, and the match. Are you matching that demand, or are you supplying what that demand is in the population, right? And we can measure these through 10 specific population measures. So the 10 metrics that we use anytime that we look at a population and we're trying to assess it for its health, related to business ownership, especially in dentistry, we're looking at these 10 factors. So you're going to look at saturation, total population, education of the population, the median age of that population, how many of those people are homeowners, the house size, the income, the density of this population, and how much that population is growing. So those are going to be the first 9. And then typically you have one additional metric that is very specific to whatever you are personally looking to build in your practice, right? So let's imagine a pediatric practice. One of the additional area specific or site specific metrics that they would have is looking at the amount of elementary schools that are in the vicinity of where they're going to place their practice, because they're obviously marketing towards young children and the families of young children. And that kind of gets me to my next point of mission and vision, something that we've kind of discussed and hounded a lot in SDBO groups, is that this really determines what is the good demographics that you are looking for. Because as weird as it might sound, it is going to be different for every single person. There is no set of good numbers that fits all and that everybody likes. Some things are good for some people, some things are good for others. So this is a pretty good example, right? If you look at an orthodontic practice, the majority of the patients that are receiving orthodontic brackets are between the ages of 12 and 14. Now, you do have some adults that are doing it, you do have some other things, but the core population, and that's what you really want to focus in on, who is the core population of your practice that you're building around? And that would be about 12 to 14 for an orthodontic practice. But if you look at a practice that would do dentures, really focus in on prosthodontics and dentures, RPDs, you're looking at a very old population relative to the average population. So these numbers will change depending on what kind of practice you want to build, and it's really important that you can design your vision as clear as possible. Another thing I wanted to talk about is we frequently worry about competition. Competition, oversaturated, there's just too many people on the market. What does that really mean? So first and foremost, let's define what competition will be. And it's somebody that you are directly competing with to receive or gain the exact same patient population. So what people don't understand is that there's kind of these 4 pillars or these 4 P's of competition that determine what your actual patient pool will be. So first and foremost is the product. I think that's easy for everyone to understand, right? Are you offering ortho? Are you offering endo? Are you offering same-day dentistry? What is the thing that you are building your practice off of? The next is going to be price modeling. If you are looking for a fee-for-service practice and you're going to have high fees for your model, that is going to be very different than a patient population that is in the PPO model or in a patient population that's in some kind of public insurance model, like Veteran Health Services or the Medicare Medicaid groups. So that will distinguish people and they won't technically be competition with each other. Another way to determine, am I in direct competition with this individual is, where is the actual location of your practice? Now, a very simple example is if, I'm marketing to the exact same population as someone else, but I live in Chicago and they live in New York City, then we aren't actual competition for each other. That doesn't actually mean that we're competing for the same people to come to the practice. Now, that can actually get narrower than you might think. It can actually be within cities as well. I mean, you can look at one end of a city and the other, and you aren't competing for the same people to come to your practice. And then lastly is promotions. So promotions aren't just the come get a free dental day or free whitening or those kind of stereotypical promotions that we think about. Promotions are also including things like, what are the operating hours of the practice? Are you open early? Are you open late? Are you open on the weekends? It also includes just, what kind of insurances do you accept? What kind of groups or types of groups are you working with, right? It really narrows down to, what is the nitty-gritty of the type of individuals that you're trying to attract to the practice. Maybe your patient population has a specific behavior, and so you promote a specific promotion relative to that behavior. But if you're working with a completely separate population as someone else, those behaviors and promotions will be different. So that actually reduces the amount of true competition that we have to a number that's a lot more manageable than when we just look at the raw data that says a certain amount of dentists per area. We oftentimes get a little freaked out by that, but it's actually, our true competition is a little bit less than that. The other thing to consider as well is, we actually want competition, right? If we have zero competition in an area, it might be saying that that area actually is a bad spot to try and practice at. And so it might seem counterintuitive, but you do want a little bit of competition in your area. The next thing I wanted to talk about is your dental market. So once you've defined what kind of population you want to work with, what kind of dentistry you want to offer, you then have to determine what your dental market is. And the dental market is defined as the smallest radius around a specific location that will include the closest 30,000 people. So, let me explain it again. You put a dot on the map, and then you start extending out from that dot in a circle. You measure that radius, right? Once that radius gets big enough that it starts to include 30,000 people around you, that's when you stop, and that's what you call your dental market. So why do we say 30,000 people? Well, it's because that some studies have indicated that usually between 97 and 99% of the patients that actually come to your practice live within that 30,000 people group, right? They live within that radius that includes 30,000 people around your practice. Anyone else that's coming to your practice outside of that radius they are an anomaly. They are not the type of patient. I mean, that's awesome that you can bring them in, but they're not who you should primarily be marketing towards. You want to be marketing towards the core of your practice, which is that 97 to 99% of your patient pool. And then lastly, about the dental market, is that the simple circle is a little too simplistic. I mean, you won't be actually creating these maps yourself. You'll be asking an expert to do them. But the simple circle it's just a little too simplistic. That's where you start off at, right? But you have to realize that there are certain barriers that will prevent people that might be by radius closer, but by true distance further away from your practice, right? So an example is shown below here, right? So although these houses over here are just as close as these houses right here, there's, this cute little mountain thing that I added in to show that there's some kind of barrier. There's railroad tracks and mountains that truly are physical barriers for people to enter into the area where your practice is at. And you'd be surprised that some of the simplest things can create large barriers for people to cross. So now we actually come to the analysis of the area for your market. So we've taken the time, we've figured out who we're marketing to, what group we want, what's the area that we're looking for, and now we know what are the demographics that we look at, and now it just comes down to we look at these and we look at the area of interest, the city, the state, whatever we're looking for, and we say, let's break it down into chunks of these dental markets, right? The 30,000 people. And we'll see how well certain areas perform. And so you're going to get these overlapping concentric rings that you can see over here in the left side of our screen. And they kind of look like the Olympic rings, right? They're overlapping, and you can see that no area has been missed by these rings. So you're making sure that every square inch of the population that you're looking at is being measured by your metrics. Then what you're going to do is you're going to assess which location is the best match to your vision, your goals, what you want. So red over here means better, blue means cold, so it's kind of like the hot cold, right? So you can see in this radius of number 17, it has the best area for practice because it's the darkest red, it's the most vibrant. So that's the Dentographics model. Now, other demographic and analytic companies might use different ways of indicating where you should go, but that's the general idea behind it, right? You go grid by grid on a map and just keep analyzing until you find the best match for what kind of practice you want to build. And then okay, I need to build my practice over there in that location. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on in this video was oversaturation. If there's one thing that we spend way too much time talking about, it's the saturation of an area. Dentists spend way too much time talking about it in simplistic terms, and they just say point blank, X area is oversaturated, and it gets a lot of people afraid of looking into pursuing ownership in these areas that might be wonderful opportunities for them. So I encourage you to learn more about saturation and the nuances of it, okay? So let's dive into it a little bit. There's 3 main reasons why I think that this, just looking at an area and saying, oh, it's saturated or unsaturated, that's just doesn't work out in my mind. You have to give me reasons why. The first reason is that population growth can outweigh an oversaturated area. So the number one listed reason for a person to seek a new dentist and you gain a new patient in your office is somebody who has changed their address. They're moving to a new location, they're looking for a new dentist, and they find one. That is the vast majority of the patients out there that are seeking new dentists. It's because they have moved locations and now they got to find a new dentist. And that means population growth. If you're in an quote unquote oversaturated area, you can grow into a perfectly stable market if you have sufficient population growth. Reason number 2, there are pockets of opportunity in oversaturated areas. Why? Because we aren't distributed evenly throughout an entire city or a county. There are plenty of uneven, non-random distributions of dentists throughout a city. You'll see them lined up in very hotspot areas, which means that if there was a certain amount of development 10, 12 years later after that hotspot area was developed, that area might be an untapped area where you could place a practice, and there's plenty of opportunity because there was plenty of growth, there was plenty of new infrastructure built into the area, and now you can place your practice there and you can say, I'm opening up shop, who wants to come in, right? Lastly, the population buffer is something that I love the most related to our oversaturation conversation. Because when people say it's oversaturated, frequently they tell you, oh, the only way you make money is go rural. You have to go out into the countryside and you have to make money out there. Now, if you want to, that's awesome. That's amazing. Happy for you. But that's not always the case. You don't always have to go and do that. And in fact, higher population densities, they will have a greater buffer or a greater capacity to take on a new dentist in the area than a smaller town would be able to. So let's look at the example below. So I created this arbitrary situation where you have 2 separate populations, a small town of 15,000 and then a medium-sized town of like 100,000 people. In the small town, they have 3 dentists, and in the medium-sized town, they have 20 dentists. So we came out to the exact same saturation, 5,000 people per dentist, right? Exact same situation. Apples to apples, when you just look purely at the saturation, it looks like there's no difference between the 2 groups. Now, looking at the population buffer, what does this mean when you add a new dentist into the market? How does that change the saturation of that area when you add a new dentist, right? So with each population, all I did was just add a new dentist. So instead of 15,000 by 3, it's 15,000 by 4. And instead of 100,000 by 20, it's now 100,000 by 21. And you can see that there's a drastic difference in the amount of saturation change that occurs. So the new saturation total with 1 more dentist added to each group is respectively 1 in 3,750 and 1 in 4,761. That's a huge change. If you look, that's a drop for the small town group. That's a drop in people per doctor of 1,200 people, 1,250 people exactly. Whereas in the bigger city, you see only a drop of about 239 people. So the bigger your population is, the more you can buffer and deal with new competition coming in, especially if that population is seeing growth as well. The whole system is very dynamic. It's never static. And so when somebody tells you, oh, don't go to X area because it's oversaturated, it's not necessarily the case. You should do your own investigation, and you should ask the experts what they think when they do their analytics. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching all the way through. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe or you can follow our Instagram page, and we are excited to see you guys in the next one.